For those of you I have not had the pleasure of meeting, my name is Erik Robinson. I am the Director of Community Management for Aperion Management Group. I see a lot of familiar names on today and a few I don't know. But today we're going to be talking about project management. Let me go ahead and bring up my slides here and we'll get the slideshow going. Share my screen. Oops. Okay, we are going to be talking about project management today with the Aperion Management Group, and specifically, we're going to be talking about Schedule A project management. So today is less of a training session and more of an informational session. As many of you know, if you're on a board of directors with Aperion Management, working with your manager, we did send out some time ago an update to our Schedule A, which outlines the additional charges that may be incurred depending on certain situations during management of your community. And that was updated with some new figures. So I recently did a training in our office with my managers regarding the Schedule A project management specifically. And what that includes is a whole number of things that we're going to go through today for everyone's information. And we're going to leave plenty of time at the end for questions and answers to any of those questions that we're able to address today. But the agenda for today is what process we go through to identify potential projects that are going to fall under the Schedule A project management charge, the criteria that we use to make those determinations for project management Schedule A items, the process that our managers will go through with the boards of directors to get approvals on the different steps of that process, the general expectations for Aperion Management Group and the board for that project management, and then what the closeout looks like. Excuse me just one second while I bring in some more people to our training. So moving right into it, to talk about the process that we go through for identifying potential projects. And this training is almost the exact same training that I just went through with all of my staff. And the process of identifying potential projects that are going to fall under Schedule A for your community can come from a lot of different places. I guess the number one place that we're going to be looking at to see what projects might be coming up, what elements may need inspection or assessment by a trade professional, or essentially what we need to be looking forward at is your association's reserve study. Very briefly, as I'm sure all of you are familiar with it, the reserve study is your 30-year repair and replacement plan for community association assets. Those things that fall within a useful life of 30 years, typically paint, roofs, siding, asphalt, those kinds of items are going to be in your reserve study because they require repair, replacement, and maintenance, but often that's not done annually. So that's reserved for in your study. So one of the first places we're looking, and around this time of year, actually for the last several months, our management team is looking at the association's reserve studies and trying to think about and project and line up what kinds of projects are going to need to occur in the spring, the summer, and the fall for our different community associations. That needs to be thought about well in advance because as all of you know, working in Central Oregon, the list of reliable, good vendors is not as large as other metropolitan areas, and their schedules fill up very, very quickly. So we need to be on the ball when we're looking at these things. I'm going to go a quick example here. So here's just an example of an association that I manage that shows a whole lot of things. This was last updated in 2022, so we'll be doing an update this year. But it shows a whole lot of things that I, as the manager, would be looking at for project management in 2024. Asphalt paving, battery backups, rails on a bridge, fences, gutters, and pool equipment that might need replacing. So generally, we're looking at this and we're going from what we know from our site visits or past issues or assessments of these different elements, what may actually be coming up for replacement and be viable for project management, and what may not be. As you know, the reserve study is a dynamic document. Things are getting pushed forward, they're getting pulled back, depending on how the actual useful life is fitting into the projected useful life of that element. Again, another way that we're finding out what might be a project is by site visits or just general observations of the association's assets. We also may get that information from vendors. If your pool maintenance vendor is coming back and saying, hey, your heater probably has 6 months left, we're going to need to replace it this year. That's something we're going to be looking at well ahead of time. Direction from the board of directors or committees could easily show us the way toward a project that needs to happen in the very near future that may fall under the Schedule A. Building reports. If anyone has, a building envelope inspection, other building assessments done, a roof assessment, whatever it is. We're having a plumbing assessment happening at a community that I manage here, talking about that tomorrow on site. So any of those kinds of reports may lead to a project that needs to be executed and will need some management. In addition, you may have strategic goal setting meetings within your association with committees, with your manager, with the board, trying to look forward and really think about what are the priorities, how much reserve funding do we have enough to cover what's coming up, and those kinds of exercises. So I want to talk a little bit about the project identification and approval flow of this process. So at Aperion, we want to be fully transparent about what's going on with project management and what may or may not incur additional charges to your association. So this chart kind of goes through what that process would look like in an ideal world, right? Like not everything, there could be emergencies where you're not going to be able to follow every step of this process. But this is a generalization of how that process would go. So once a project or issue is identified, our manager, along with anyone else they need to talk to, is going to figure out, is that going to be a Schedule A project management charge, or is that just going to be a regular maintenance project? And I'm going to go over examples and some of the criteria for that in a few slides. So once that's identified, if it's project management, the manager is going to go to the board for approval to develop a scope and a request for proposal to send to the vendors that we want to bid for that project. So let's just take a roof replacement, for example. Let's say we need to get our roofs replaced in 2024. We have internally a whole lot of templates and information on what those kinds of scopes need to be for different replacements, or we may have past RFPs for the last time this project was done that we can draw from. And we may also utilize some of our trusted vendors to help develop a scope for these requests for proposals, with the promise that they would be, one of the first ones that could bid that project when that RFP goes out.
Maintain it, right? Not that it isn't caring and beautiful.
Sorry, I'm going to stop for just 1 second. If you're not on mute, could you please put yourself on mute? I'm getting some background noise.
Eric, you can also hover over them and mute folks that aren't.
Yeah,
mute.
Thank you. I just didn't want to go through all the controls and stuff.
Yeah.
Like so once that scope and that request for proposal is developed, we're going to send that to as many vendors as we have sourced. sometimes committees or board members may have, we want you to send it to these people or these people. We have a long list of vendors by association and just global vendors that we can kind of draw from to send that RFP out. And that is going to be an RFP drafting expense per the Schedule A, which is separate from a project management expense. And I'll talk about that for just 1 second. The reason that it's separate, and I think it's $200 an hour. Usually an RFP takes 1 to 2 hours to put together, is because we may do that work. We may get bids, evaluate the bids, and present them to the board, and the board decides not to move forward with that project. So that's still an opportunity for Aperion to get paid for the extra time it takes to put that scope and RFP and bid evaluation together, but doesn't put anything else on the hook past that if the board chooses not to go forward with that project at that time. So the Schedule A RFP drafting expense relates to this step, as well as receiving and evaluating the bids. After that, we're going to present those to the board of directors, who's going to choose the vendor for that project. And then we're going to essentially ask the board if they want Aperion to manage that project or if they have other plans to manage that project. And I'm going to go through that in a minute as well. Once that decision's made, assuming that Aperion is going to do project management for whatever that situation is, we would notify the bidding vendors of that decision. We would draft the contract for that project. We would develop the schedule and communications related to that project, execute that project, and then close it out. And I'll talk a little bit more about those steps here in a moment. And this whole piece right here is the 10% of the total contract project cost, which is outlined in the Schedule A. So just going through some criteria and examples for what's going to fall under a Schedule A Aperion managed project. And I just want to note, this list is not exclusive and it's not necessarily going to apply to every situation. We continually try here in our office to develop tools and resources for people to have easy access to information. But in HOA management, it's so hard because there's all kinds of different situations coming up all the time that it's hard to, nail down what each one of those might be and what the solution to those might be. So just a little caveat there before we dive in. So Schedule A project management items are generally going to be things that are not annual. They're not predictable. So reserve items, essentially. If you have a main bridge that goes over, a river leading into your community, and that bridge has logs and rails, nobody really knows when rot and work is going to need to be done to those, or when those are going to need to be replaced. So the sourcing and the contracting and the demo and the installation of a whole new bridge, rail, and log system is certainly something that would fall into this category. Oftentimes, a Schedule A project is going to require a contract or a purchase agreement. We have a attorney-validated contract template that we like to use for these projects. It's fashioned in such a way that it protects the association and management as much as possible from any eventualities that may occur during the execution of that project. And we're going to use that and kind of attach the contractor's proposal as exhibits to that contract. Maintenance items generally don't require that level of contract. It's going to require more on-site visits. If you're replacing a roof, or you're putting down a concrete coating, or you're laying down a slurry seal, the manager is going to be on site more often than your contract says for site inspections to make sure that that work and that scope is being fulfilled per the agreement. These projects require a lot of logistical work. So a lot of communications. Let's say roads are being shut down, building functions are being affected. I managed a project recently that had a whole lot of coordination that was necessary with the rental company who managed a large percentage of units in this community. And we had to identify when we would be able to get into these units and do this work out on the decks. So typically these kinds of projects are going to require a lot of planning, pre-planning for scheduling and for communications to go out to owners. Some examples would be maybe pool resurfacing, fence staining or replacement, building painting, concrete replacements, roof replacements, paver installations, or landscape remodels. So kind of switching gears over to what are some criteria and examples of just maintenance? How, what is maintenance versus project management? And again, this is not exclusive or will apply to all situations. But maintenance are things that are generally going to be annual, things that we find predictable. Yeah, we know we always have to do, XYZ to the asphalt, or we need to crack seal, or we need to, reset pavers. It can be a number of different things. But generally, those kinds of things are funded out of the operating budget and not the reserve budget. They're predictable, they're routine. Generally, they're not going to require a contractual agreement or multiple site visits. And typically, they're not going to require multiple proposals. You're going to have, a handyman, or you're going to have, people that have done a little siding work here or some roof work there, and usually going to be calling those people. Maybe that's just time and materials, $1,000. We try not to do dollar amounts, but those are the kinds of things that are going to fall under the maintenance category. So minor siding or fence repair, crack sealing, or mulch application, if those are annual in your community, gutter cleaning, carpet cleaning, those kinds of things are going to fall under the maintenance bucket. So Aperion Management Group does charge 10% of the total contractual cost to manage a project. So what are you essentially getting for that as a board of directors and an association? What's the value? So I wanted to talk about that a little bit. So when we're chosen to manage a project, that community manager is going to be the point of contact for the board of directors, all the owners, and the vendor for any approved project. We are going to draft that contract, review the schedule, do a pre-construction meeting, make more on-site visits, take photos to ensure the work is being fulfilled per the scope. And additionally, we're going to address any change orders that might come up, and certainly not listed here, but if you're doing a project where you're getting into a building, you're taking things apart, you're definitely going to find things you did not expect. So evaluation of those change orders, approval by the board, all the things that come with changing a scope or adding more scope mid-project is going to be part of that as well. We're going to provide communication to the owners, to the board, everyone involved before, during, and after that project. Our AP department is going to ensure prompt payments and maintain a complete accounting of that project cost. In addition, if there's liens related to that project, construction liens, they'll do the paperwork to have those released when the project's complete. And then the manager is going to conduct a final inspection with the contractor, develop a punch list if there is one for anything that needs to be completed, and then draft and provide a closeout report, which I do want to talk about a little bit. I'm going to jump out of here and into here. So I did want to say, I feel like for Aperion's project management, the drafting and remittance of a closeout report for the board of directors and for the association's records is a big part of this value of the 10%. So this is an example of a closeout report I did for a project that was a concrete coating project at a condominium building. And this kind of thing, I'm just going to go through it real quick, but it has a whole narrative information on color choices, the vendor, how the project came about, how it was identified, what some of the issues were. It's like a narrative of the whole thing from beginning to end. Any problems that were encountered, how those were overcome, all of that's going to be in the first part, which is the project information. It's going to go to a project team. Everyone who was involved in the execution of that project talks a little bit of that process there, and what our scope of that project management is also located there. It talks about the schedule here, and when everything happened. It's going to go over any warranty, and then it's going to have pictures of what occurred. The appendices and exhibits of the closeout report is going to include, board actions for when these things were approved. The contract, which you can see here, is part of the closeout report. Just kind of buzzing through a lot of boilerplate in this thing. And then the contractor proposal is also included, as well as the RFP that was sent out for that project. This is product information on what was put down on the decks for this particular project. Sorry, I'm going kind of fast here. It's 26 pages. But I will tell you, as a community manager with over 10 years of experience, having records like that in your association official records is going to be invaluable for the future, for future board members, or if you have future management that's not Aperion. Those kinds of records are just massively valuable to look back at and to understand, how did this project unfold last time? What were the issues that were encountered? What was that product again? What was that color? Who did this work? Those are often questions when we take over associations and begin managing them that just don't exist. That kind of detail, that level of understanding and narrative of what happened, is very difficult to discern by going through previous management files. So in my mind, a big value of the cost that you're paying for Aperion to manage one of these Schedule A projects is obtaining and having that closeout reports for the association records. Now, what if you don't want Aperion to manage that project? Maybe the budget's tight. Maybe you have someone on your board or on a committee who has a whole lot of expertise in that area and a whole lot of free time. Certainly that's an option too. So there is an option, of course, for a board managed project. If you don't want to have Aperion manage that Schedule A project. So this is where a qualified volunteer acts as a point of contact for that project. So again, let's just talk about maybe a roof replacement if we're talking in hypotheticals. So in this case, that board member or the other volunteer would essentially act as the manager for that project. So they would coordinate and interface on that schedule with the vendor, the specifications and the logistics, the communications, design, and execution of that project. So the pictures on site, things that come up that are issues, they're going to work with the vendor on handling all those and communicating that. Now, that doesn't mean that Aperion's not going to have any part in executing that project. We no doubt will have to be utilized at times during the course of that project to probably draft the contract, which isn't a huge time suck. We do have a template. It's generally the same. You're filling in payment schedule and different vendor information and everything. And if you need to adjust it a little bit, we do. So we'd probably be involved in that, sending the approved communications. So if it's a volunteer, we have the software and the ability to send out a mass message to all of the owners and property managers all at once. Oftentimes that power doesn't lie with the volunteers. So we would be provided with a, that volunteer could be like, hey, Erik, can you send this communication? It needs to go out tomorrow about this project. Great. Yep, we're going to do that. And then, of course, we're going to ensure prompt payments to that vendor. So any work that's performed by Aperion in assistance to the board managing this project is a Schedule A hourly expense. So depending on the amount of time that that they're being asked to spend in facilitating the execution of a board managed project, that's just going to be an hourly charge. Again, some of these things in our office don't take that much time. If we were provided a communication, that's not going to take that long to send. Adjusting a contract and providing that's not going to take that long either. So it's hard to say what that hourly amount would be, but that's certainly an option. Now for billing, Aperion maintains a billing spreadsheet for each community for all our Schedule A and architecture review committee expenses. It includes percentages and hourly billing formulas. So it's just how we track things internally. And the final billing for your AMG managed project isn't going to happen until that final inspection and punch lists are completed, and that closeout report is with the board of directors. So this was a point of emphasis in our internal training recently, was we can't bill that 10%, or maybe it's less if there was a progress payment, depending on the amount of time that a project can take. There may be a progress payment in there for the management. But any final billing is not going to occur until that closeout report is received by the board. So one question that's probably going to be asked, and I'll just try and address it here, is why aren't these charges part of our regular management fees? And the reason for that is because when we meet with boards and community associations beforehand, we kind of get to know each other. We provide a proposal for management services. That proposal is based on quantifiable and predictable factors and our kind of collective management experience with how much time, how many resources, and how much staff will need to be involved in the management of that community. So we're looking at things like how big is your community? What do the governing documents say your maintenance responsibilities are? What different amenities exist in your community? Is there a pool? Are there playgrounds and parks? Is it just, is there just a field? Is there not a whole lot, right? What do your common areas consist of? So those kinds of things we can generally kind of predict, like how, as we're portfolio managers, your manager has multiple communities that they manage, how much of their time and the rest of their staff's time, the administration staff, is it going to take to, based on those quantifiable and predictable factors, to effectively manage that community and meet everybody's expectations? Reserve and large scale projects aren't as predictable. And as you can probably guess, they consume a significant more amount of time and effort from multiple departments in Aperion to pull off, right? So we're talking about the increase in the on-site visits. We're talking about the coordination and the communication of all the scheduling, the contracts, the documents, change orders, lien vendor releases, and a whole lot more that might occur during the execution of that project. It'd be hard to know when we're bidding a management contract for, a new community association that 2.5 years from then, they're going to have to undergo, a major siding replacement, which, that kind of work is going to consume a huge amount of our team's time that was not part of what we I guess signed up for in that contract, which outlines, we're gonna manage your annual maintenance vendors, right? If you have a landscape vendor or a pool vendor or a snow removal vendor, like those are known things that we can predict. Otherwise, we're looking at, kind of reserve and large scale projects. I do have a project management FAQ that we developed internally, which kind of goes over the answers to some of these questions that we felt like would commonly be asked when it comes to our project management. Jessica, our director of marketing, is going to send this to everybody in attendance today. along with a link to the recording of this informational session. But that is what I have kind of to share with everyone today. Again, we're looking at these projects now. We have a project management board that we're trying to project, when these projects for 2024 are going to occur, what we project the potential cost of them is going to be. And we're trying to line all this up for our associations now, and seeing as how the new Schedule A went out not too long ago and goes effect in March. And the internal training we just did on this, we felt it was timely to just inform our boards like where we're coming from with project management, what value it adds to the execution of these projects in your community, and kind of how we go about it internally. I'm going to stop sharing now and open it up for any questions. I see there's a couple in the chat here. Yes, we're recording it. And someone asked, have we been getting these services in the past as part of our monthly fee? I'll be fully transparent. It's possible. It's possible that there have been projects like this that your manager has done and not charged for in the past. Whether that was, the reasons for that, maybe our management team internally didn't understand that that was a Schedule A project. That's kind of part of the reason why we're doing this with the boards today, why we did it internally, why we updated our Schedule A, is because we wanted everyone to be on the same page about what these are, why we charge more, and the added value that the communities get with this kind of management. So that's the end of the chat. I'll open it up for any questions from our attendees today.
Hi, this is Kara Golden. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, Kara.
Great. Thank you for doing this. This has been very insightful.
You're welcome.
It fills in a lot of the blanks. From an old project manager, from my perspective, what's the project management training from a process standpoint that takes place with your teams?
That's a really good question. So we have a number of managers who have a lot of experience from other management companies that we've hired that have project management experience. In terms of, if we are hiring an assistant community manager and they're being promoted to community manager, if we're training someone from the ground up to be a community manager, we have a lot of resources, and we do a lot of ongoing training internally within our office that addresses that kind of knowledge that they're going to need. In addition, we have a whole level of senior community managers above our normal community managers who all have project management experience. And then, I've done a lot of it myself, and I'm always available as a resource for our staff. But I guess through a combination of collective experience in our office, experience from being community managers elsewhere, and an understanding internally through ongoing training and education what the deliverables are and what the expectations are for project management within our office would all combine
Okay.
to do that. And we talked about this a little bit internally too, but it's certainly possible that you have a project in your association that needs management that your community manager doesn't maybe have any experience with, or doesn't have feel necessarily comfortable with, in which case they would probably throw it out to the rest of our team, and maybe someone like myself or a senior community manager would step in and we would manage that project. So we have those different levels for a good reason, but generally I'd say your community manager is going to have the support and the education and the training to manage generally most projects that are going to come up in a community association.
Okay, thank you very much. That was very insightful.
Thank you, Kara.
Hey, Eric,
Hi, Ron.
just a quick question, following up on that. Is it your intent to have any kind of certification, project management certification for your folks? You know, are they gonna go for their PMP? Are they gonna go for their PMC? Or not?
That's a good question, Ron. And actually, I see Katie took herself off mute, and I was going to ask if maybe she wanted to answer that one. For
Yeah,
the
I can
team.
answer that one.
Yeah.
I think there's a little bit of a line there, Ron, where our managers aren't acting as, any type of construction engineers on these projects. So I haven't encountered a project where that would make sense for our managers to pursue that. A lot of the education, certifications, and training that our team is doing is from an industry perspective. So many of our managers are taking additional CAI courses this year, and a lot of it is through that lens. So I don't envision them seeking or us seeking those certifications at those levels. This is really a coordination and oversight type of role, but it's something that certainly as a company, we're always keeping ourselves open to the education that's necessary for our managers to do their jobs. And that has evolved a lot over the last 5 years.
Yeah, that's a really good question, Ron. And actually, one of the questions in the FAQ that we're going to provide to everyone that I tried to answer here was, do Aperion community managers hold the required expertise to manage all different kinds of projects? And I'll just read it verbatim. But the answer that we have to that generally is that Aperion community managers, we have considerable experience managing all different kinds of projects. And more often than not, a high level of expertise in the field isn't required. What is required is really good communication ability, maintaining a positive working relationship before, during, and after the project, prompt payments, understanding of change orders and their necessity, how to represent the association's interests and protect their assets and the owners, ensuring all the contracts and construction documents are signed and legal, visiting the crews to check in, and just troubleshooting and solving issues as they arise. If a high level of expertise in that field is needed to effectively manage a project, I think we just probably talk about that as a one-off.
Mm-hmm.
Does that answer your question, Ron?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions?
This is Kara again. I have a question.
Take care.
Hopefully I'm going to craft this correctly. Since we're talking about a 10% of the cost of a project, so let's say it's $150,000. Just that's a nice number.
Okay.
So that's going to be $15,000 in project management fees, which says to me that that's going to take a certain amount of time. And the community manager, by and large, already has a full-time job. So how does the community at large get the support they need and the information they need that you've laid out here if this person is already carrying a full-time job and now you've got another $15,000, which says to me that's a certain amount of additional hours, because it equates to hours, right, in the bottom line. So how do you balance that?
Kara, that's a really good question. So you're right, and certainly it is going to take more of that manager's time than it is normal to manage the everyday, goings on of that community. And it's difficult to know before a project starts how much time that project is going to take. So I guess, first of all, we also do a lot of training on time management and prioritization and communication internally. So certainly getting real crafty with your schedule and how you're blocking out time for those additional site visits and how you're still meeting all of the deadlines for the rest of your portfolio and that community takes some experience, takes some work. Also, the community manager is likely going to, again, they're going to get help from their assistant community manager from their senior community manager, and from myself, with any pieces of that maybe they're not able to get to that week, have time for in that moment. We certainly preach and preach and preach and talk internally about how we're a team, and that's why we've developed these different layers. Additionally, and we do preach for our company and for our managers, trying to achieve as much work-life balance as they can, but our managers are salaried, and if they need to put in some extra time to effectively manage a project that they've been chosen to, they're going to put in that extra time. Katie, can I talk about our program?
Yeah, I was
Okay.
gonna say that, part of this program too, I think we've shared pretty openly with all of our boards over the years that, we push pretty hard to try to compensate our managers as well as possible, because we want to keep them and we want to reduce turnover for you guys as a client. And that's getting harder and harder to do in this market. But part of this program is a revenue sharing with the manager. So there's just an understanding that there will be extra hours that are put in by that manager over and above their full-time job to get these projects done. And we compensate them for that through that revenue sharing. And that revenue sharing is actually shared across all departments. It's not just with the manager, it is also with the accounting team who's paying the extra bills and those types of things. But this isn't something that's expected to happen within their, sort of 40 hours of work within a week. It's understood that when these projects happen, there's going to be extra time and hours put in, and that's just the reality. We can't really 100% do away with that. And so we do have a profit sharing process set up with our managers for this project management time.
Thank you very much. Those were both really clarifying answers, and I appreciate it.
Yeah. I didn't know if we were addressing that today or not, but we do, that 10% is earmarked for that revenue sharing for the different departments. And then a percentage of that is also put toward an educational stipend for ongoing education of our managers. We have a number of people already signed up for, higher level community management courses this year. And that revenue helps to fund all of that. So are there any other questions today? Well, I want to thank everyone, 45 minutes exactly, for joining me today. If I went too quickly, if you have follow-up questions, I'm sure you've got emails for your manager. They can get you in contact with me if you want to talk to me. But Jessica will be sending out, again, a link to this as well as that FAQ to everybody. And I hope you enjoy the rest of this weird day in Bend, where it looks like we're going to get all 4 seasons.
Thanks, Eric.
Thank you, everybody. I'm going to stop recording and end the meeting.